Okay, so welcome to episode number 34. How's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Fantastic, guys.
You're here with your one and only true and favorite member, Olu.
Happy Friday, guys. Actually, Olu, now that we're doing videos, should we just say, like, yo, my name's Shuel?
Oh yeah, no, that's true.
Cool.
You guys can introduce yourself. Okay, cool.
Well, mine says it right there, DJ.
You're here with your favorite podcaster, Olu. Oh no, the other way. Olu.
You're here with the man with the facts, with the quotes, DJ Daniel.
You're here with the most valuable of them all. MVP, baby.
And I go by the name of Shuel, but sometimes people call me Shuey. If you want hoodies or caps, let me know. Call me.
You sound like you got to work. Come on.
So on this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the planet. What is our impact on the planet? Especially what's going on with the Amazon forest, everything going on. We want to really understand, what are we doing to impact this planet? Are we helping, or are we just, living our lives and not thinking about it? And then we'll have the book review, which will be taken by DJ Daniel Johnson. So stay tuned and let's get started.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
I'll show you my lion one.
Oh wow!
Lion!
Lion. I can't see what. Yeah. And then
That
I got another one. Elephant. Which way up is it?
Yeah, I've got the same elephant one. I'll cut up. No, that's dope.
What did you do, Olu? You cut it up, you said.
Nice on
Yeah,
the
so they
canvas.
have that. No, I didn't cut it up on purpose, but they have it where it's split into 3 different panels.
On the canvas.
On the canvas, so you can split up on your wall.
See, that's the arena. That's the arena that right now I have no idea. The art is.
We could tell from your background that you don't have no. Everyone's got. I've got my painting at the back.
I've got a notice board.
Paul's got a little bit of art. Daniel's got a notice
This
board.
is handmade in Tokyo by this old lady.
Oh wow! And P is just in a white room, just all white.
It's got a lampshade though.
But what P does have, P does have a mustache, which no one else in this quarter has.
Oh,
You have a full mustache. What happened to the rest of your mustache?
I know, boy.
What happened to the bit down here?
P, considering how big that mustache is, how can you breathe through your nose, man? Is it not blocked, kind of? That's a lot of hair, bro.
No, it's faint.
All right, cool.
Faint or non-existent?
What we should do? On another episode, we can talk a lot about how I've, obviously learned to cut my hair. My first experiences. It's quite funny.
Cool. Can't wait to. And we need to see some pictures as well. Some pictures. Take off your hat. No, I played. Okay, let's get started.
The reason I wanted to introduce this topic was we live in a world where we've seen in the past couple of months in London, it's been very hot, and people often attribute this to global warming, or saying that the polar ice caps are melting at more rapid speed, that the whole climate around the world is changing. And even last month when we were in South Africa, people were saying, oh, this time last year it was a lot colder, it wasn't as warm as this. They're saying it was almost freezing. And it's a knock-on effect around the world, not just England, not just the UK, but around the globe. And it got to a point where we hear a lot of people talking about action for climate change, to do things differently, and how we, the plastic bags in supermarkets costing 5p or 10p, and ways to reduce our waste that's, having an impact on our environment, on our planet, to wildlife, to species in the sea. And I thought, as an individual, what am I doing? As a group, what are we doing? And as a population, as worldly citizens, what are we doing? Because it's not just going to be something that's going to impact us, but also future generations are the ones that are going to suffer and have the ramifications from our actions. So I really wanted to kind of talk about it. And in recent weeks, there's been a lot of conversation around the Amazon rainforest, about the rainforest being on fire, the world's largest rainforest, but also to debunk some myths about that, because it's not just Amazon rainforest, because there are more rainforests on fire in Central Africa than there are in the Amazon.
Oh,
So
wow.
I wanted to highlight that as well. So, you know, in the Congo Basin as well, that's the second largest rainforest in the world, and that's been on fire. And there are many fires in Central Africa that are a lot more than what.
But haven't been publicized at all.
Yeah,
no one's mentioned it.
Precisely. And even with the pictures that, just to say before we get into it, even with the pictures that people have been sharing on social media, Instagram, you know, even some celebrities, these are pictures that have been taken like 10 years ago, and people don't even know that these are old pictures of the Amazon rainforest from previous forest fires. But anyway, so my question first of all is, what are you doing in order to have a positive impact on our environment, or what actions and steps are you taking? Well, Shaw has a big 1 liter plastic bottle of water. So what are you going to do with that bottle once you finish it?
Ooh, can I just say on this topic, shout out to Evian for the sponsorship and for sending me 100 bottles. Evian, live young. It's a good drink. So actually, Daniel, this bottle is 100% recyclable. I checked, which is why I asked Evian to send them to me. And this bottle has actually been made from recycled plastic. But actually, no, on a more serious note, I think, if I'm very, very honest, before the second half of last year, this is a topic that you hear a lot about, but for me personally, I had not that much curiosity about at all. And then last year, when I went to a conference called One Young World, you have people there that are fighting for many different causes. So it can be to eradicate poverty, it can be for education. And there was a big community of people that were talking about how can we save the world from a more sustainability standpoint. So I attended a few of the talks on that topic, and it really did open my eyes up and awareness up in terms of what we're trying to do, but also a lot of the areas that we've not done anything at all. And then since then, coming back, I'm a bit more conscious of, I know I'm drinking a plastic bottle now, but I'm a bit more conscious of in terms of the single-use plastic that I'm using. If I'm going to the supermarket, taking my own bags rather than paying for an additional one. But it's just for me, I'm at this stage where I'm just aware of the usage that I'm consuming myself, and trying to reduce that a little bit. But I haven't got to the stage, if I'm honest, and I don't think I'm educated enough on the topic to start really pushing for big changes. I can only really affect what I can do individually. But on the flip side, can I just say, actually, thinking about it, and I'm sure PABILO can mention, in Switzerland, where both PABILO and I are living, recycling is part of the DNA here. And the way that they impact that behavior is, for your normal bin bag where you chuck your general waste, you have to pay the equivalent of 30 or 40 pound for 10 packs of this bin bag. Now, because you're chucking your rubbish in there, what the incentive is because you're paying so much for your general waste, you're incentivized to make sure all the plastics and everything else that you can recycle, you take to a recycle bin. And that's actually ingrained in the culture here, and something that I noticed a lot more. It's prevalent here than it is in the UK. So that's something that I think I'm trying to be more conscious of on my side. How about the rest of you guys?
Olu, what do you think?
I'll be honest. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. Just in terms of, I drive. A lot of times I drive to work by myself. No, like, I'm being honest about it.
It's just the way you said it. It's the way you said it.
Because you said it like we're in this. What do you call those circles when you're on rehab and you're trying?
Like,
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Anonymous beings.
Yeah.
He said, "I drive."
I'm gonna name all the stuff that I do. That
Go ahead.
But on a serious note, like, I drive to work by myself, so I'm already using the fuel admission, which I could easily use public transport or train, but I drive to work just because of the convenience of it. I'm not always the best with recycling, anything like that, but I just feel like it's something that we don't really do enough. And I would like to understand from you guys what you guys do and how we improve, like, sort of incentivizing people to get more involved and make the right decisions for the environment, because I completely believe in global warming. I'm not like some people like Donald Trump or these people that say global warming doesn't exist. You could tell global warming exists just based on, like Daniel said, the changes to our climate and the weather. But I'm just not doing enough. So I can hold my hands up and say, hey, is an area that I need to work on.
Yeah, I want to.
I'm gone. Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you're interested to see what I'm going to say. For me, I'm just not plugged into that world whatsoever.
Yeah.
And right now, even as I sit here and say it, I don't even necessarily feel bad about it. I think. So what? Like I remember looking at the Amazon rainforest, and I remember them saying, you know, it's 20% is of our oxygen.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's interesting facts. Just kept it moving. And so
I'm laughing because until you're like, oh, I'm short of breath, man.
Yeah, I know. I'm explaining kind of, and I'm not even too sure
No, it's
why.
good to be honest. Yeah, it's good
I'm not, but I don't have. So we recycle because, as Shaw mentioned, we're in a situation where the bags are so expensive. You're not going to stuff all your plastic bottles inside your general waste. I cycle to work, but I'm not cycling to work. I cycle to work because work is literally about 7 minutes away from my house, or from the apartment. I don't think about the best thing I'm doing is recycling a bunch of bottles every couple of weeks and so, but I'm not conscious enough. Like I know, like for example, one of my previous managers, he actually he's taken a lot of methods and ideas from China. So he actually built like a so he doesn't have in his house the water used to flush toilets and also what comes from the taps comes from the tank that he's put in his garden. So he's dug up his garden in the middle of the garden, and then what he does, that tank fills up by the rain.
Oh, like a water bath.
Water, exactly. So and then all of the tap water and toilet water are basically coming from that. And so I thought I said to him, where did you get that idea from? Because he's Dutch. He said, oh, I'll just follow I watch the Chinese and what they do. So that's someone who is certainly conscious about keeping the environment protected. He likes to take the train instead of flying. I'm not thinking on the same level of frequency or wave yet. And I don't know actually what it would take for me to do that.
For me, I would say I care, but also there's some elements where I don't care. I'll give you both reasons. No, I'll be completely honest. And I think not the bit that we don't, when I say don't care, is something that we all do and we're not really cognizant of trying to reduce that. And that's the flying and holidays. But the things that I do is I do recycle at home, even when it comes down to food waste. So we have a separate food bin for just food waste, and that's in a small bag. And then you have your normal rubbish, and then all plastics, etc., cardboard, paper is recycled.
That's what I do as well. I've got a food waste one. I just want to.
Yeah. Okay. So
my little bit.
That's just something. That's something small that I've been doing for years, and I tend not to just put things in a rubbish bin, even when I'm out and there's a bin and it says paper and then everything else. I always make sure I put it in the right one. Whether it gets sorted or mixed later on, I don't know, but I'm trying to do my part. Even at work, working for a company which they really do value the environment and the impact that we all have, is we have, for every station there's a bin. There's one for confidential paper, one for food waste, one for recyclables, one for dirty cups, one for cups, one for liquid, and one just general waste. And it's almost like you're in a sorting station when you get there, when you might just take a load of rubbish from your desk. It's like being in a sorting station because you're putting bits here, bits there, bits everywhere. But it's just, these are small steps.
We have that as well. I think, go ahead.
Whether these small steps, whether these things are going to help in the grand scheme of things. And a friend said, I recycle a bottle. Does that really make a difference? We don't know. But at least if everyone does it, like we spoke last week in Atomic Habits, when it's compounded, it has a bigger impact and a more positive thing. And just to share in terms of, I've got some facts about how we are impacting the environment, whether it's through recycling or not.
Spit your fire, Daniel Johnson. Spit your fire.
I got some notes.
In terms of the global temperature rise, the planet's average surface temperature has risen about 1.62 degrees Fahrenheit or 0.9 degrees Celsius. And this has been since the late 19th century, which meaning that there's a largely increased amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the warmest years have occurred since 2010. And not only 2016 was the warmest year on record, but 8 of the 12 months that make up the year from January through to September, with the exception of June, were the warmest on record for those respective months ever. And we all know from, science, ozone layer, the ice caps, and all of you got plastic. I'm using glass.
Bad.
I recycle my plastic.
Yeah.
I
Where did
recycle
that water come from?
So where did it come from? It came from water filter. Water filter.
Which
And
came
what
from where?
was the plastic of the water filter? Where does that go?
No, what do you mean plastic? The water filter is a container, and that's reused and it's kept. And the water filter itself, that when you replace the filter, it's recycled.
You use those capsules for the water filter. It has those capsules that you can only use for a certain amount of.
Yeah, it says there's a recycled.
Those are recycled. Just making.
Yeah. So when it, I will talk about this. There's been, of course, we all know about the polar ice caps, the shrinking ice sheets. That billions of tons of ice have melted in the last since 1993 to 2016, and the rate of Antarctica ice mass loss has tripled in the last decade. And we might look at pictures from Antarctica, and when I watched like BBC David Attenborough, like Blue Planet, you see, oh wow, there's a lot of ice, but considered what it was like years ago, that's not what it's like now. So even the glaciers is something that David Attenborough constantly talks about, and snow cover in areas where there used to be high populations of snow, and the sea level rises. We all know that Venice is continuing to sink, and even the Maldives is at a vulnerable sea level. And when we think about these, don't just think about what it's happening and say, okay, the ice caps are melting, the Earth's crust is getting hotter in terms of temperature, but this also has an impact on wildlife. When we talk about the ice caps, how about penguins and species which need cold climates? So even the polar bears, where they're migrating and they're not thriving, or they're becoming endangered species, or to some degree extinct because of the impact we're having. And I'm not saying I'm a huge animal activist. I watch these shows because I have a keen interest for lions and things, and I love the way that David Attenborough narrates, and just he just commands your attention through whatever it is when it comes to animals and species. But it's just, we have to think about what are we doing, because we all know that in a food chain and an ecosystem, we need each species for us to be able to survive. And any kink in that species, any change in that ecosystem has an impact on us as individuals. We probably think, why the hell do we have mice? Why do we have birds? Or why do we have camels? Or anything that we might not like as an individual. But every animal on this earth has a fundamental part to play in terms of how we live.
But how do we get people to care? Like everything you said, I understand it makes sense. But you can there's people. No. The reason why I'm asking that is because
one of the action points I took down was to book a trip to Maldives, because they won't
so get flights. But the reason why I'm saying why should people care here, because you understand that people have got so many life problems that they're facing,
Yeah.
and like they've got to think about, okay, where am I going to get my next meal from in certain aspects. So how do we make it where people feel like, okay, this is something I should care about for my problem situation, and I could actually prioritize the environment? Because
unfortunately, I just don't think it's something people are going to care about until they're impacted firsthand.
But I think even then, Daniel. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the part when I said that there's a part that I don't care, not that I don't care, but where we less thinking about the environment is when we get on a plane. When we take, we all love flying, we love going on holidays.
Why are you laughing?
Well, am I laughing? Because we don't necessarily think about the impact on the carbon footprint when we get on a plane. We just think, oh yeah, it's a holiday, I'm going. So we don't necessarily tend to care when it comes about going on holidays, when it's about going out. I'll drive here instead of taking the train because I know it's going to be quicker or it's more convenient for me. And those are the things where I'm less probably thinking about the impact, and I'm more thinking about
that's probably the maximum in terms of all the stuff that you do. That's probably causing the most damage.
Well, but then to be honest, if I don't catch that flight, they're still going to sort the ticket. But
this is the whole concept.
I don't
need to recycle it. They're going to still produce the bottles.
It's true. But then the one thing that stands out to me that I always consider is, you have these philanthropists, you have people that are advocating for climate change, but they still parade around in their private jets. They're still going from A to B like it's like they're walking down the street. And
reminds me of the corporate game. So a lot of times corporations will say, okay, we're cutting travel. And those same corporate guys,
the C-suite taking the PJs,
still flying jet.
yeah. And even was it last month where Harry and Meghan were, ridiculed because they went to France on a private jet, but yet they're advocates for some company organization. And then Elton John came out and spoke about, oh no, it was he sent his private jet to pick them up and bring them down to the south of France. But why do people, especially celebrities, they advocate for this and do all of these things, but they will still fly around in a private jet?
Mm-mm. But I think also, if I reflect about my trip earlier to Bangladesh earlier in the year, when you're walking around those streets, people are so poor, they're chucking litter. They're not even thinking about it. To put their rubbish in a bin is not a thought. I remember I was walking through a village with one of my younger nephews, and then this kid just came up to me and started talking to me, and then he was having crisps. And after he finished his crisps, he just chucked it on the floor.
Mm.
And then who am I to tell the kid, oh, go put that in the bin, when if you look around, there's rubbish everywhere. And they've probably got bigger problems where they're thinking about how are we going to get our next meal? How can we get actually a real house instead of sleeping in this kind of tin hut? The bottom of their priorities is recycling and being sustainable and stuff. And I think that's a challenge where in these poorer countries where they're maybe years behind where the developed countries are, how can you change their behavior? Because they've got bigger problems. And I don't know what the answer is to that, to be honest.
Mm.
I think one of the answers is if we have more summers like we've had this year, at some point people will start to see what they can do, because at some point it's been unbearable. Yeah. Well, hang on one second. Okay, imagine there have been some
colder winters.
Colder winters.
Yeah, if we had hotter summers and a lot more harsher winters, people probably would start to care more.
I hear what Olu's saying, but
do you guys see the storms happening in certain countries?
Sorry?
In certain countries that are impacted by storms,
like Florida right now.
Yeah, like Florida and places like that. So we see the impact for them. Yeah. But we're like, it hasn't touched.
Wait, hang on.
Okay, I get you.
I mean, like it's happening in the world. The world is reacted to the environment, but people don't care.
But is Florida is based on where they are? Is that anything to do?
It's partly due to where they are, but it's also the creation of the oxygen and everything in the atmosphere above that area, which then creates the storm.
Have you realized that as we're going on, we're getting more storms? Like it's not just a coincidence that these are increasing and all these natural.
Because even in the UK there were a couple of storms last year. And some people debate whether it's really a storm or should be classified as a storm. But there were more frequent. There have been more frequent storms in the UK in the last few years that have had, that has damaged power lines, rail tracks, etc. I remember last year there was one where it was quite strong, and even driving on the motorway, the car was going side to side.
Jeez.
So we are seeing the impact near us. It's still not it's not a priority. I think, to be honest, where it needs to be. It's sad, but it needs to be a priority from the top. I honestly feel like this is one of those where.
What do you mean when you say the top? Who's the top?
Like the governments and every country needs to have certain metrics and KPIs in which it needs.
Government, man.
If you try to if you try to do this at a grassroots level, honestly, there's going to be a few people that prioritize it because they can. A lot of times, you can worry about stuff.
With social media, you don't need the government to do anything for you.
No, like you say, like on a real.
No.
I don't agree. I agree with
we're talking about charity.
No.
You know what we're talking about charity, yeah? Like Daniel and I being able to go away. We could only consider going away because our life is in a particular position where we can prioritize going away. Yeah. So same with this environment. So many people don't have time to care about the environment because their life is not in a place where they can say, oh, let me start thinking about the environment. So that's why you need to have at a top level, government level, where it's like, okay, what is our mission? What is, just like in the UK and the government are saying, okay, how many?
No.
I feel like it's people that drive the government. So when people have protests, when people are activists and standing for what they believe is right, then they influence the government, and the government will then do something. But the government isn't the one that's going to initiate these changes.
Let's take the plastic bags.
Don't exist,
let's take the plastic bags.
You want to impact change?
Why did plastic bags? Why did the plastic bags? Why do people start using less plastic bags?
I don't know the answer.
Because they put a charge on it.
Thank you. It has to come from the top. You need to put real laws and restrictions in place. Otherwise, it's not going to change. Let's put a post up. Let's put a post up and say, "Hey guys, let's stop using more bags." A few people would do it, but it's not going to be a mass change. It's not. I understand. Yes, you need the activists to say this is a concern. Put pressure on the government. But the only way you're going to get a mass change is if you have laws and regulations in place to change it.
Okay.
But I don't want to.
But you need to kick off movements.
I think you need
for anything you need activists to kick off movements. But if you blow up a tweet, all activists blow up a tweet and say, "Let's do this." Yes, people in the activist circle will do it. But the person that's worrying about where the next meal's coming from or trying to chase their dream is not going to care about that particular tweet. But if they have to go into a store and they say, "Hey, there's now a regulation that you have to pay 10p, 20p, 30p for a bag," they're like, "Oh, this is hurting my pocket. Let me now bring that bag that I had from home." That's the only way.
But I think if you combine that with kind of like a bottom-up approach, I think consumer behavior, if that changes, which I think is changing over time, I think that also drives behavioral changes. So if you think about how popular meat-free food is, or vegan, or reducing the use of single-use plastic, all of this I think is driven by consumers becoming more aware, and then that will kind of shift businesses also as well, because I think businesses are also, they want to try and make
it into a business. No, it's true. It's true.
And I think also
let's start making some money from it.
I think also where the money flows, like if you look in terms of how much investment has been made over the last couple of years in green energy, sustainable energy businesses versus 10, 15 years ago, that also will shift the behavior.
Let's talk about green energy. Wait. What are you passionate about now? Do you know the government gives reliefs to companies that invest in green energy?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. There still needs to be a business need behind it, right? If we know that in 20, 25 years' time, the companies that have already invested in sustainable energy sources are going to be the ones on top. Again, they're following the business trend. People like us, me as a consumer.
Why do you think they're following the business trend? Do you not feel like the reason they're following business trends is because governments are now introducing more tariffs on businesses that are doing less?
But again, my view, and this is my personal opinion, is I think the government does. My view on government is that they're more reactive to things rather than proactive. And if they're given kind of tariff-free or subsidies to green companies, they would have done that a lot later in the process. Personally, I think the market would have moved that way anyway, and then they kind of jump on.
I will agree with you in terms of the government is late. I'm saying the reason why companies are doing it is because of the reliefs that they get, the tariffs.
Yeah, for sure. It's an incentive.
And that is what is set by the government. Because anytime a government says, "Okay, you know what, we want to be greener 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Okay, how do we do this? Okay, let's subsidize companies that invest in this space. And make sure that, okay, if you're going to invest in this, you don't have to pay any taxes on whatever." And then companies say, "Oh, cool, let's now jump on board." I understand some companies will have, "Oh yeah, we want to help the planet," but a lot of times, if it impacts their top line.
But then another thing is, do you guys support companies or brands that are ethical brands that aren't going to impact the environment with their waste or the way they do their testing? Whatever it may be, because I know Lululemon are quite an ethical brand. I think they brought out a new range or something where they guarantee that in terms of their clothing, it's in right conditions and it's not child labor, and it's even when it comes to testing the products and the research and development, it's done in an ethical manner when it comes to disposing of the waste, etc. And do you care about whether your clothes are manufactured in an ethical manner in a way that does or doesn't impact the environment?
All of us have got an iPhone, so that sort of.
Okay, how does that impact the environment though?
No, but I'm talking about in terms of people have said in terms of some of the materials that they use for iPhones and how they maybe it's not environment, but it's still. It
should be more of how you dispose of it, then, isn't it?
I think it's also exploited labor and stuff.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if we're not so outraged by the conditions of the people and the kids that are doing it. I don't understand how now we're going to be like, oh yeah, environments. We care about what, like, we're not.
Okay, yeah.
We don't do enough in terms
Because
of.
even when it comes to washing up liquid, I bought one last week. I think it's called Eco something, and it's supposed to be plant-based and, you know, environment friendly.
Mm-mm.
I'll tell you what, that bottle has gone down half in like the space of a couple of days, whereas my fairy liquid will last me 2 months. So I'm thinking, is it worth it? Because it's not exactly cheap. But you know, if I'm helping it, I thought, well, Melissa was like, oh, we should try this. I said, okay, we'll try it. So I know they have it at work. But then I've realized that you use a lot more of it than you would otherwise, and trying to be cognizant of the impact you have on the environment. It's just like eating healthy. It's very expensive.
The other thing that needs to happen is, because what you guys mentioned, that this is obviously not something that's happened overnight. It's been the last 10, 15 years. Is they need to, and now Ollie was obviously going to say, yeah, that's going to come from the government though. Is that you need to perhaps insert this as a curriculum in the schools, because what it is that I'm starting to ask myself, how much do I even know about, or was I paying attention about the ozone layer and about things that, if you look at how to preserve the world or planets in general, was it a subject? Was it taught well enough that it's ingrained in us that we can actually have something to reference by? Because the fact of the matter is that you guys mentioned it earlier. Even as you're talking now, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, do you know how many problems we all have that we're tackling? And now you want me to sort of tackle the ozone layer? My brother, I just ain't got that kind of time or bandwidth. So it comes, and then it also, and another reason why I respond that way is because I don't know enough. So it's.
I've hated this conversation. I'll be honest with you. No, because this conversation makes me truly feel bad about myself and what I'm doing, and like
I don't know about feeling bad.
No, I do feel bad because we can't be ignorant to the fact that we are having a negative impact on the world, yeah, and like you mentioned, Pete, I totally agree with you. There's so many problems that we're facing in our lives and stuff that you're like, okay, I'm not really trying to prioritize this, but I honestly feel like it's something we need to do, and I'm not sure if one of our listeners or Daniel can just say like, okay, what could I do that can help?
I think it's
more stuff. It doesn't need to be like a massive stuff. I think I recycle food already. Yeah, but if it's like, okay, you know what? Do a carpool and be like, okay, how many people are going? Like, if you're going to this area and like your friends, okay, let's get into one car and drive here. Like, just those small things.
Yeah, no, it's true. The thing is, I think from a micro level, we are doing our bit, and I think the problem is that it's not. For example, we've been recycling for years now. I've been riding the bike or taking a tram to work for years now. That's again
because it's 7 minutes away. Make it be an hour away. Let's see if you jump on that bike.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that I think this discussion is making me think what we're doing on the larger scale, what we're doing on the big, like, none of our content on social media is to do with changing or helping the climate change. I'm not maybe I need to buy a book about the world and understand what it really is and how to preserve it. So I think what is the action item from a standpoint beyond recycling bottles and plastic?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
I think I might have to start
any recommendations?
Some more animal documentaries like Daniel. Some more wildlife documentaries.
No, but the thing is with the BBC Blue Planet, I think there was a huge uproar, I think, after one of the episodes about the way plastics are being disposed of in the sea, because there are many animals that you've seen that's becoming more prevalent that you see are entangled with plastic around them or being suffocated by some sort of plastic or waste from a human. And I recall seeing a video of a tortoise, and it was very distressing actually, and it had a plastic straw up one of its nostrils.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
You know, obviously, when they were removing it, you could see all the blood coming out, and you could see the distress that it was in. But I found it liberating when it was removed. But just to see it lodged in all the way up,
your own nose. Yeah, I saw that.
And that's an impact we're having. But I would, to conclude, I would say is we all have a part to play. There is many small things we can do individually that compound when compounded can have a big impact on the environment. And just to think about what we're doing individually in terms of even when it comes down to our mode of transport or method of transport, how we do things and how we can do things differently.
Cool.
Dope. I think that's a great way to close the topic. I think everyone needs to raise their level of awareness, probably less so Daniel. But I think it's good to have the conversation. It's good to have the conversation and make more people aware of it, because I've definitely learned a lot in this convo. So, segue to the book review, Mr. Daniel Johnson.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this book was actually recommended to me by one of our listeners. And when they recommended it, they said that this book would be very, very appropriate for one of our listeners too.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who that is?
Me.
P.
Yeah.
I read it.
Oh, he read it. And I said to them, "Oh, he probably read it anyway."
Yeah, I can see from the color of the book. I said, yeah.
What's the book?
Was it the color or the size of the book that you could tell? Was it the size of the book? He's like, I know that size of that book. He's got pictures in it. I finished that in 2 days.
How to manage oneself by Peter Drucker.
Yeah, so it's a book by Peter Drucker titled Managing Oneself. And the reason why I read it is because it was recommended to me. So I went ahead and read it. And this book, in a quick one sentence, helps you unlock your full potential by discovering your strengths, recognizing how you best work with others, and identifying the work environments that are right for you. And I've got some notes as to, the book, how it's laid out. It's a very short read. It is 56 pages, so you can finish it in like an hour. And hopefully it wasn't a book that P flipped from front to back in the middle, because that would have taken 10 minutes. So the book itself.
Pete, my gosh! Every book review. He's reading habits. Every book review.
Pete, how long did it take you to read this book out of curiosity?
I don't remember actually. I don't remember. So my story with that book is that's one of the books that Tai Lopez speaks about a lot. So I actually went, I think 1 or 2 chapters. I went to read what he spoke about.
Yeah.
Got what I needed, and I don't know if I read the whole thing.
Okay. Oh,
what was the book too long? Is that why?
Nah, because I told you before.
Was 56 pages too long?
let me get into it. So
please get into it.
So one thing the book says, we will have to stay mentally alert and engaged during a fifth health. So managing oneself, but also goes into how you relate and interact with others. So it makes you ponder the questions, what are my strengths? How do I work? What are your values? Where do I belong? What should I contribute? Taking responsibility for relationships, and also focusing on the second half of your life. So you need to ask yourself, what are your strengths? And it says the only way to achieve this is through feedback analysis. And it gives a great method, which I'm going to adopt. And it says, whenever you make a key decision or take a key decision, write down what you expect will happen. Then in 9 or 12 months later, compare the actual results with your expectations. And, Peter had been practicing for this for 15, 20 years. And he said that every time he does it, he's surprised. And it's a great way to see what your values are. And when you practice this consistently, the simple method will show you within a fairly short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 years, where your strengths lie. And this is the most important thing to know, because as I mentioned in one of a previous book review by Tom Rath on Strengths Finder, there's no point focusing on your weaknesses. It's good to know what your strengths are. Often people know what their weaknesses are, but are very poor in identifying what their strengths are. So this is a good method to try and identify where those strengths lie. And so how do you work with others? So surprisingly, few people know how to get things done. So when you're working with others, instead of trying to guess how you're going to succeed, be positive and know how you will succeed. So instead of focusing on working hard to improve the way you perform, to know how you perform, you need to understand accurately in what ways you work best. Do you work well by yourself, better by yourself? Do you work good with a group of people? And it's not that you try and change yourself, but it's trying to perform to the best that you can perform. When it comes to what are your values, to be able to manage yourself, which the book is all about, managing oneself, you have to ask yourself, what are your personal values? The organization that you work for, what you do, what are their values? Because if they don't line up, if they don't match up, you're going to find yourself in constant frustration that what you value isn't valued by the organization you work for.
Does that happen for you guys at the moment? The companies that we work for, do you feel like they line up to your values or?
100%. They line up due to the fact that I like working for an organization that cares about the environment, that encourages and fosters a place to volunteer with time, with skills, with knowledge, etc. And that's just something I enjoy, because that's one reason why I wanted to work for them, is because when I heard about their 7 core values at the time, they were all things that resonated deeply with me.
Cool.
P, sure. How about you?
P, you're
You're on
muted.
mute, bro.
I think while P's unmuting himself, I think from my view, so at the moment the company that we're in has 3 areas that they want their employees to be active in. So it's to be curious, to be inspired, and to be unbossed. So the concept of unbossed is basically there is no hierarchy anymore. If you have an idea, whichever level you are, you should be given the freedom to express your idea, express your view, express your opinion. And if it's something that makes sense, you should go forward with it, rather than the old structure of you have to tell your manager has to say yes or no, blah, blah, blah. It's completely flipping the kind of pyramid upside down. And that's something for me personally, combined with the curiosity and being inspired, that I actually really enjoy. I feel like there's more freedom. I can do what I want. And personally, I enjoy trying to do multiple things and not having limits put on me. And I think that's something that relates to my own personal values as well. But I don't know, P, what your view is.
No, just to quickly add on that. I think one thing, so, I mean, in the last 7 years we've been working there, one of the things that resonates well with me is their appetite to want to develop people into leaders. And so I think that has rubbed off very well and it's aligned with what we want to do, because it gives us leadership skills in other areas of our life that we're able to also thrive in success. So that's one thing. The second thing is I actually work for a company that developed a drug which has kept my dad alive. And if he didn't have this drug, he probably would have, I don't think he would be alive anymore. So, and that's something that I keep at the back of my mind.
True. Cool.
How about you, Oli?
No, completely agree. So working, especially when I work for GE Healthcare, working in a company that makes equipment that saves people's lives was one of the reasons why, in terms of the conglomerate, I chose the healthcare business when I initially started, because my mum was a nurse. So it's something that I saw the purpose, meaning, saving lives. That's a company I want to work for.
Going back, it's good that we all are, working in a place we feel valued and the values resonate deeply. Otherwise, I guess we wouldn't all be with the same company for over 6 years. But also going back to the book, it poses the question, a good juxtaposition of a reader versus a listener. So points out that most people are readers or listeners, and very rarely both. And to learn and to perform most effectively when you're managing yourself, you need to understand and seriously evaluate whether you're a reader or a listener, and focus on acquiring knowledge through the appropriate channel. So when it says reader versus listener, are you someone that you like to read things, or would you rather listen? Because when you understand yourself, what you are, what your preference is, it's also good to understand what you may perceive others' preferences to be. Because when it comes to communicating to someone, am I going to send them a message, a long email or a text message, or will I give them a phone call and speak to them so they can listen? Because people are very rarely both. And for you to be, to maximize the conversation or communication, it's always good to adapt to someone's preferred method of communication style.
Okay.
And the thing is, when you should question yourself when you're about, am I a reader or listener? How do I learn? How do I work well with people? Or am I a loner? Because when you're under stress, when you're working under stress, you need to be highly structured and predictable. When you're working under stress, do you want a highly structured and predictable environment, or can you cope and manage and work under stress? And for yourself, would you prefer to work in a big organization or a small organization? And these are questions that only you can answer, because when it's talking about managing oneself, it's almost essentially being a CEO of your life. There's a great, I had something highlighted here, and it was about Winston Churchill. And it was about saying, when it comes to your experience, when it comes to knowing how you perform or how you learn, Winston Churchill was very poor in school. He did very poorly. And when people don't tend to do well in school, they see it as an experience which they remember as pure torture. But people who didn't, underachieve in school or didn't necessarily have a bad experience wouldn't see it as that way. They have fond memories. But it's knowing that, listening and reading you can either learn by writing, or you can learn by reading, or you can learn by listening. So it's really understanding yourself and managing oneself to make sure you put yourself in environments where you can thrive and perform to the best of your ability. The other things that it speaks about in the book, which I'm not going to go too much more detail because the book is very short, and if I go on any more,
I think no one needs to buy the book afterwards.
But it talks about to figure out where you belong, about planning. So planning over 18 months gives you a reasonable, clear, specific of what you can do and how you can achieve these results, and also talk about the second part of your life and just wanting to make sure that you're still focusing on your strengths and where you can perform well. And one thing I will end with is the challenges of this book may seem obvious, and what the book challenges you to do may seem obvious and somewhat elementary, but the answers may seem self-evident to the point of appearing naive. But managing oneself requires a new and unprecedented things from the individual, and especially from the knowledge worker. In effect, managing oneself demands that each knowledge worker thinks and behaves like a CEO. So to reiterate, the book is called Managing Oneself, and the author is Peter Drucker. But just to say, it's a very short read. It's about an hour read, so feel free to get it. I think it's about $5.99 on Amazon or so. So yeah, there we go.
If it's more than $5.99, will you do a price match, Daniel, and pay the difference? Or
yeah, sure. It's $7.99. Cool. So thank you for listening to episode 34 of Take Flight Podcast. Take Flight Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. Do ponder how you can impact the environment, and yeah, let's hear your thoughts, your suggestions, or even what you're doing to make the world a better place. We'll see you, or you can hear us. Actually, we'll see you, or you can see us next week on episode 35.
Wherever you want. We're
so
here.
Yeah, if you have any feedback, any topics for discussion, please hit us up on Instagram at Take Flight Podcast, or email us at takeflightpodcast@gmail.com. That's all for now, folks. Have a good weekend. Peace.
Stay blessed. Peace.
Take off, take flight.